everybody. Happy Wednesday, and may the 4th be with you.
Yeah, I see you hid your little R2D2 deck there over your shoulder there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
For those that aren't geeks, May the 4th is a pretty big day for Star Wars fans, and they just dropped the Obi-Wan trailer, the second one, this morning. So if there's any Star Wars fans out there, check it out. Even if you're not, it is pretty cool. Well, Ken, good to see you again. Where are you located today? I'm going to bring up our banners. One of the things that we love to know is where you are from. So, Ken, where are you from today? Because you're always somewhere.
I am at my home office, sitting on my home fake beach, thinking about going and seeing and doing. I've been home for a while, which is unusual for me.
I was thinking about you actually in your travels, because just yesterday I booked some travel stuff for myself for a lake up in northern Ontario for some pickerel fishing in July. So not quite as nice as your tropical destinations, but on the water and taking a boat.
Yeah, well, and I'll be up in Canada here not too long. I'm going up to Alaska and do a southbound cruise. I'll may visit Vancouver Island, for example. So that would be I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a lot of fun. And what I would say is, if you're watching this on the replay, because we know not everybody catches it live, in the notes put a response to where you're watching it from, because we'd love to know that as well.
Yeah, and really great to see you, John Alfred, all the way from Norway. And we often do get people from different parts of the world, as many people might remember from when we did the original Flat Rate Challenge, that we had them from all over Europe, Australia, some parts of the Middle East, and Canada. So I'm here in Canada. And Ken, we've actually got a special guest today that's from somewhere else. So I'm really excited to bring in Wes McArtor from BI Next Era. And without further ado, here we are. What's going on, Wes?
Hey, good morning, guys.
Great to see you. In which part of the world are you with us today?
I'm in sunny Arizona.
Nice. I wish I was there with you, because it's rainy and crappy here. But
yeah, I got a Star Wars joke for you, Wes.
I'm ready.
What's the internal temperature of Tatooine?
I don't know.
Lukewarm.
That's awesome. And for anyone else that has some Star Wars jokes, I love it. That's great. I'll be using that one all day, Wes. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Well, it looks like Art Post is joining us from Jersey, just back from the Bahamas. And I did see some pictures of your adventures and travels there. Look absolutely awesome. And Wes, you just got back from somewhere too, right? Where were you?
Absolutely. Yeah, we had our whole team in Tampa, St. Pete.
Beautiful. And the pictures there look quite amazing as well. And the weather was good for you there?
It was a great time. Weather was good. Everybody enjoyed getting to see each other face to face for the first time in a while. So that was all worth it.
Well, that's great. And things have changed, right? I mean, that's, I remember reading your comments on one of your posts on LinkedIn. It's the first time you've been able to do that in a very long time, right? And, certainly the world has changed. It seems like we're coming out the other side now, but I think that obviously not all things are going to, remain changed, right? So one of the things that I'd like to do today is to really get your expertise and experience on what these changes mean for the industry, right? And one thing I love about what you guys are doing at BI Next Era is that you've been crunching the data for so many years, that you've collected so much data points, that you've worked with so many dealers over the years to understand, what some of the things that are happening that are impacting our industry, right? So I really appreciate that. And maybe one of the first things I'll ask is what's the same, right? So obviously it's not been, a wholesale change in the marketplace, or has it? Has everything changed? Like, what are the numbers that you analyze on a regular basis telling you about that remains the same for dealers?
Well, obviously the sameness is responsiveness and delivering the customers and outcome. What do they want? If they're printing, what does that outcome look like? I think what's changed is how much that's happening, and to the degree, what are customers' expectations changing is how you manage documents, right? Because one of my favorite sayings was from Ed McLaughlin, where he talked about print is just the one way of moving unstructured data from place to place, right? And so that's that to me is what's changed. Now, There are pockets that haven't. When I look at education, where schools are back open, their page volumes are kind of back where they were. Government, medical, some of those pocketed places, page volumes don't look like they've really changed all that much, or they've come back to pretty much pre-pandemic, right? But the general SMB space is still 28% down from where it was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite incredible, right? And I think what I'm hearing is that we have these persistent pockets. And, and I wonder sometimes if people are paying attention to those persistent pockets, did they have to start specializing more to really attract and garner their attention to get those pages? Or is it, or is it something that their needs are more general than they have been in the past as well, right? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, what I see overall is that, I've always been a preacher of this volume tiered process, where you look at groups of machines running similar page volumes to try to figure out cost bases around that, right? So the percentage of machines in this tier 1 that I call, which is the lowest volume tier, has been about 42% for probably close to 10 years. 42% of my entire database lives in that very first volume tier. What's changing is the average monthly volume of that tier, right? So when I first started tracking it, it was about 3,200 pages a month on average. As of this last month, it was 808.
Sorry, can you repeat that? So that was 3,200 to 800?
Correct. So what that's telling me is that the customer's usage of that 28% page volume drop isn't necessarily a smaller number of units. It's the number of units are actually producing less pages. Same number of units are producing less pages, right? And what's happening is that group is sliding, some of that page volume is sliding into that lower volume tier as a result, right? So machines that used to live in volume tier 2 are now moving into 1 because the page volumes have dropped.
Interesting. So that's a good segue into what's different, right? So, and for everyone that's watching today, please submit your questions and comments. We'd love to hear them. Even if you're watching this after we go live, we'll still get those comments and questions and get back to you. So make sure you leave them there.
Okay, and I want to kind of go back to a little bit, just a question, because I kind of started a little bit of a conversation in last week's episode. I got some people a little excited in what I said, but as you look at the trend and look at what's the same, are you seeing any improvement in the shift from where dealers are starting to right size the equipment? Are we still seeing the same challenges where dealers are continuing to oversell equipment, and especially with what you just mentioned in the page volume decline on a per unit basis? It seems like that would be so much more important that dealers think about that, because I know from my looking at your data, and I love your data, that the profit margins are so much worse when we oversell equipment.
Well, that's been one of my primary pet peeves. Is I don't think that's going to change until the sales comp model changes, personally, because there's just way too much financial incentive, both on the sales compensation part and on the manufacturer compensation part, right? So when you look at how dealers, make their money, there's a percentage of that comes from hitting quotas and getting specific rebates and selling certain numbers of products. And so that, again, accompanied with the sales comp model as itself, which is encouraging every sales rep, not just at that dealership, but every dealership the customer is talking to, right? So there could be 5 different dealerships all bidding, but they're all basically going after the same thing. What's the highest dollar machine I can sell them that meets their needs without going silly? I'm not going to sell them a production print machine if they don't need one, but if I can go from a 25 minute page per minute machine to a 40 page per minute machine, okay, maybe I can sell the payment and get them to 40.
Right.
So
yeah.
until then, I don't know how that's ever going to get fixed, because as the data shows, every single machine is volume sensitive. Everyone. There isn't hardly one out there that isn't. And if you don't put it in the right page volume environment, it will cost more than it should. That doesn't mean it's costing more than you're billing. It just means it's costing more than it should. And right size says, I'm going to sell the machine that not only meets the customer's expectations first, but meets my profit expectation second.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I have to have a minute here, because how do the sales reps get the bigger machine in and keep the payment where it's right for the customer?
Well, I mean, obviously, because it's a competitive situation, right? So the payment is relative to what everybody else is bidding. So all they have to do is beat the competitor. That doesn't mean that if they're going to go down and get a $200 a month less payment. So classic example, I was working with a dealer last week, and they want to go out and sell inkjet, right, on a flat rate, because I'm a huge proponent of flat rate, right? And so the idea is that he's going out and he's trying to take out relatively established A3 devices, right? And he wants to go in and replace them, right? Well, he's got a choice. He can replace them with a like-size machine, laser, right, and compete head-to-head on price. Or he can go in flat rate with a machine that's much less cost for service, right, on a flat rate, right, and just literally take it over, because he's going to be in there 50% less cost, even for the same speed of machine, right, in a competitive inkjet environment. So it makes sense to me that's what's going to change, is that there's going to be some disruptor that comes into our market. And I think every dealer needs to be cognizant of that if someone else comes in that isn't hampered by the old history of our sales comp model, isn't tied to a specific vendor, right, has the flexibility of picking and choosing which product is best for that customer, and or if it were me, kind of goes to the Southwest Airlines model, where you're not trying to sell 150 different products, you're trying to sell 10 or 15 that do the most. That's the threat.
It is. And I love what you're saying there about not being hindered by the old model, right? Because exactly what you talked about with that dealer that you were working with on that flat rate option, even if the dealer is not getting the same level of discounts from the OEM, like on their equipment or whatever, for the volume buys and where they want them to buy, that they're still better off. And that's such a hard thing to get our head around, right? Is that you can break away from that by placing those kinds of devices. So I love to hear it, because obviously you run the numbers. And like you said, I encourage everyone to reach out to Wes if you haven't already, and his team at BI, to have look at what they can help you with on that data side, because I guarantee you we're looking at the numbers in the wrong way when it comes to how we can make money and print going into the future, right? That's my soapbox. Sort of bring the control back to yourself as a dealer, work with the numbers, figure out what's most profitable for, your company, right? And stop discounting service. Absolutely.
Not that I have an opinion.
We've got a few comments I want to get to here as well, eh? And Greg, Art Post is laughing out loud. So let's go back up and see what the comment was. Well, first he said nobody oversells. In a perfect world, right? It's funny, Greg, I was actually having a conversation with somebody about doing the right thing. They were saying that we could solve a lot of the health problems, be more preemptive if everyone only ate more salad and, did these things and everything else, right? But again, the models of even food aren't built that way, and it drives behavior, right? So yeah, nobody oversells, nobody overeats. Comp model and OEM side, if they still make A4, they still stuff the channel with A4, right? Isn't this an A3 versus A4 debate as well? I don't know. What do you think? I'm not sure that it is anymore, right? That I think people are starting to understand that A4 placements, but I'm not selling it, so maybe I'll jump out of this one. What are you seeing, Wes? Like, is it still an A4, A3 battle, or is A4 comfortably found its way into this new future?
Well, I think it's found its way into the future. Part of it happened as a function of the new hybrid work environment, right? Where everybody had a desktop printer at home for personal use at some level. And now they were using that for work, or had another printer installed just specifically for work, right? Which became a security vulnerability, obviously, for most people. But what it really did was got them comfortable with the idea there was a different way to manage that structured, that unstructured data, right? It was not practical to print everything at home and then carry it back to the office once a week or once every other week, or whenever the lockdown let them do that. They had to get that document from point A to point B another way. And as they got more and more comfortable doing that, I think that's what started changing some of that behavior. when you look at the data and look at the number of the A3 devices, the number of actual 11 by 17 pages that are produced, it's rarely small.
Yeah.
It's still there. And almost everybody agrees we'd like to get rid of it because there's still people out there selling single click 11 by 17, right? So at some point in time, we have to realize that, okay, yes, there is a small niche like production. There's a niche that needs that, but is that the mainstream? You know, and then you have the duty cycle differences, right? So a lot of the A3 product has a higher duty cycle, which says, okay, yes, I can run it longer. But I'm sure Tanya's on the call can verify that a lot of the machines coming back off a lease do not have anywhere close to the number of pages on it that the machine was designed to run.
Right.
Which is why they're so valuable after the lease is over, right? Because they're practically brand new. It's like getting a lease off lease vehicle for 3 years. It's got 10,000 miles on it.
Right. It's like, I'll take one of those every day.
Right. So, I mean, I can give you examples. So PR4, that's an A4, 60 copy a minute size printer, right? I've got let's see, I'm going to get the actual number here. 353,000 of those devices in the database in the first volume tier, and they're averaging 484 pages per month on average across 350,000 devices. That's a 60 copy a minute machine. You're not going to convince me in a million years that isn't somewhat oversold.
Yes.
Right? I've got a $250 Epson printer underneath my desk that would do that 480 pages a month and not even breathe hard.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to bring up a comment actually from John Alford that he mentioned, because it was kind of brought up earlier, that Art did mention, obviously, sometimes the customer just says, give me what I want. I want a 60 page a minute device, right? Okay. And John says, Art post print speed doesn't mean the same when printing volume and job type change. If the average print job is 3 to 5 pages, speed doesn't mean any difference. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, and I think that's what you're kind of getting to with this 484 pages a month. Clearly, that device could probably be doing 10 pages a minute and probably still satisfy whatever they're trying to do. Right.
Well,
I
obviously,
want to interject into that point as well, because that becomes an education part of a sales rep's job. Because if you think about it, the difference between 10 pages a minute and 100 pages a minute on 480 pages over the course of a month is how much time?
Yeah, if they change the model, though, right? Because I think one of the things that was mentioned, obviously, Wes, you really illustrated very well, is that the sales and compensation model doesn't allow for that. So is it my job to educate the customer? Well, not if I'm not getting paid to do that, right? So if I'm getting paid on gross margin on the largest device I can safely put in there, like you said, without being ridiculous and onerous, then that's what I'll do. That's how I get paid, right? So I think
Greg is dead on. It's actually just a hair under 1% today, but it was 1% back in 2009 as well, even in my data. So he's falling right in line with what the data says.
Yeah, and nice that Jean-Louis is saying this is where TTFP and warm-up time play a role, but is obviously difficult to sell, right? So yeah, I guess the TTFP is at the first time to first page, right?
Well, and that's another one of the advantages of ink, right? Doesn't have a fuser section to warm up. So it just comes on and prints. And, so that's another one of those challenging things that's against the status quo. So,
yeah. Greg is thinking about your number there, 300K, 60 PPM devices at 44 a month. It is quite incredible, right? When you think about it. And Greg, I'm with you. Back in the day when I was doing managed print assessments, that's one of the things that I would do. The first thing I would do is start looking at the A3 volumes on those devices, right? It was anywhere from 1 to 3% of, total volumes in the environment, even back then. So it's not like people are suddenly printing. And I mean, you'd have the numbers, Wes, but I think the A3 volumes have typically always been pretty low compared to what they're doing in A4, right?
Well, the A4 volumes have been much lower than A3 just because of the position of where the device is in the office and what it's used for. I mean, back when we started in '93, we were the opposite. We were trying to get everybody go away from the low end, go mid-range high, because there's more money there. And then, color came along, and then, now we got to do MPS. So now we got to capture all the desktop units when we were trying to get them to run that page volume from the desktop unit to our centralized A3 in order to lower page cost, right? And then we kind of do MPS. Now we're kind of going back the other way, where we're just distributed printing again and going. So the industry has always been kind of moving around, trying to figure out how to accommodate what the customer and what technology is allowing for, right? Back when we started the business, there were distinct differences between the manufacturers. I can remember starting out on liquid machines, and then
sure.
against, dual component, and then, you have enlargement and reduction. Ooh, but today that homogeny is pretty much gone. I mean, everybody's kind of the same. And in fact, in interviewing customers, more often than not, they couldn't tell you the brand name of the box.
Or care anymore, yeah.
Care. And, it's so that relationship with the dealer is still the most valuable thing we have. As
it should be, right?
Right.
And Jean-Louis brings up a valid point there. I want to talk about that too, right? That education is difficult. And I know from the assessment-based selling days, when I used to go in and do full assessments for customers, sometimes people just didn't want to learn, right? That a lot of the hard and fast entrenchments that they've had, if they believe that HP is the best, brand for their organization, if they believe that Kyocera is, the right fit, if they believe that an A4 can't compete with an A3 for functionality, oftentimes it's very difficult to get past those things, especially if people sort of marry their, professional opinions on those things, right? So, yeah, I agree, Jean-Louis. It's not as easy as always knowing, the right stuff and trying to teach that to people, because not everybody listens, right?
And there's another side of that equation, if I interrupt you, Ken, is that there's this common story. I had a college call me, and they were working with a bid, and they said, well, we know you kind of have the data, so here's the specification, and here's what all these vendors came back with, right? And I literally had to laugh at the guy, and I said, first of all, let me tell you, there is not a single vendor in existence today that can do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
He said, well, why are they saying that? I said, because you put it in your bid spec. They're simply telling you what you want to hear, because you're saying that's what you want. Well, they're not going to say no, right? Or they won't even be considered. So they're just basically lying to you because you asked them to.
Oh, it's so frustrating. And you know what? The number of alternate RFP submissions that I had done over the years, right? Knowing full well that what the customer was asking for, I need this many 60-page-a-minute devices, I need this. Like, they really thought they had the whole menu built out. But looking at data like you provide, Wes, once you go through that and look at the service numbers by class and what those average volumes are, the only way to get that information in front of them in those RFP situations is to do an alternate RFP. And I would honestly say, like it's almost like wasting your breath. I'd say out of 20 alternate RFP submissions that I submitted, I probably won one. So that's a lot of work for twice the amount of submission time, anyways.
But when the customer is hearing the same message from everybody, right? That's where we fall into that trap, is that the expectation is being established by what the customer's been told up to this point, setting a different expectation, and then they come back and go, well, that expectation needs to apply now to this new RFP, right? With no basis in reality, and everybody just tries to do the best they can to live up to it.
Yeah, it's funny. John McInnes, I don't know if you remember him back in the day when he was doing print audit, and he said to me one time, we were actually out for a beer, and he said, Wes, I was talking about some consensus on something, and he said, don't be so enamored with consensus. And I said, well, obviously, I mean, all of he said, yeah, all of the people could be wrong, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about. They've heard it enough. So consensus is not always your friend.
Okay, and I want to get Wes to take a look at the statement that's up that Greg made, because let's talk about the service profitability on a 60-page-a-minute machine running at in the, let's say, that small band that you talked about. What's the average cost per page on those machines? If you still have that data up, Wes?
I don't have that. So when I talk about the volume band information, one of the things that I always talk about is Every machine has its sweet spot, right? And so a 10 page per minute running low volume will have a much higher profit margin per page, but a smaller number of pages. Whereas the 60 page per minute might not perform very well there. So we call it service legs. A lot of devices will incur roughly the same amount of service across a fairly wide spectrum of page volume, right? They just will. The on-off cycles, in a lot of cases, we think that some of these machines are really more susceptible to this heat up cool down cycle that happens with small page runs, when if you just fired it up and ran it for a long period of time, it'd probably run significantly better than it does. But I just picked one machine as an example. This particular dealer that I had has a couple hundred devices in the field of this one model. And of that, bulk of them landed in that first page volume, right? And this is without toner. This is just parts and labor. His cost is 015 in that one page volume, right? The average for that product across all page volumes is 008.
Oh, man.
Right? But nationally in that page volume across my database is 0.04. So he's doing substantially better than the average. But in that one page volume, if I want to add toner and margin in there, is that realistic to expect that machine to give me profit at 015 cost, parts and labor?
No.
Not unless they've got an exceptionally high base. Now that we've been getting away with that for a long time too, right? So the bases and the minimums have been there, right? That helped an awful lot of dealers get through COVID, right?
Yes.
So what it also pointed out to a lot of customers is, wait a minute, I'm paying for pages that I don't produce.
Right. And how long has this been going on?
Right. And that's created another conversation with dealers that's challenging to deal with, right? Because it's part of the lease agreement, it's part of the long-term sales contract. So how do I make that adjustment? That particular model that I mentioned, it does not get to where it matches that 008 as an average. Let's just say it doesn't, that's where I want it to be. It doesn't do that until it's in excess of 1,700 pages a month. It's a low volume machine, right? So that's 3 tiers up from the bottom.
Yeah, and what I see, because like I said, I spend a lot of time in the data too, is that in most cases, unless you're putting minimums, and that's what I'm telling the service managers now in the service management class, is if you're going to have these low page prices, the only way you can make profit in services is if you have a minimum that's going to get them out toward about to the point that machine starts to perform well, because any pages they don't make then increases the per page price and you can start to be profitable. But you cannot sell, go back to that machine that the page cost is at 015. You can't sell that machine at 8 mils on service and supplies and ever make money. You're going to lose money every time that makes a click. And so many dealers and let their sales reps go out and sell their service without minimums, and you're killing your profit in your company.
Well, and that's why flat rate is such a big thing, because we all sell payment, right? We all sell payment. Let's quit talking about page volume and just start talking about a payment, because that minimum is going to come back to bite you when the customer doesn't run the pages that and they know they're getting billed for them. So that's one conversation you don't want to have. We need the minimums and the page volumes to compensate us for the fact that some of these machines are oversold. Whatever the reasons are, they're just not running the page volume we'd like them to run, right? But if we got to a flat rate, you just build it into the payment, it's one payment. We're not separating out the machine cost versus the service cost. It's just one payment.
The other thing, Wes, though, is that it naturally, when we're selling a flat rate, and when I've gone through the calculations with customers, kind of deal crafting, it forces us to start looking at right devices for right purpose, right? That because of that service profitability that you guys produce, it's like, look, if I'm charging a flat rate, per month, that's all margin. Anything that's too big that I put in there, that's underperforming, that's costing me, like you said, 0.015 versus 008 per page, that doesn't make sense for me as a dealer. Like, why would I do that, right?
I think that, and there's the simpler argument for me is that we know page volumes are either static or declining. Right. Very few pages are saying, oh yeah, it's going through the roof. There might be pockets, but that's not what I'm talking about. But if you just simply did an analysis of your customer base, 97% of your customers are customers you resell every single cycle. right? Your net new is, most dealers would like to target 10 or 15% net new, but reality is that they're flipping their own base. So you already know their page volumes. You already know whether or not they're increasing or declining. Two, you already know what you're charging them, right? And probably have been doing that for years. So what they're converting that to flat rate is not that challenging.
Agreed. Yeah.
If you're making money at the current page rate that you're charging them, and you can document their page volume is static or declining.
Yeah.
The administrative cost savings alone is worth doing it.
It absolutely is.
You're not out there hustling meters and trying to make sure it's accurate. Still the average dealer to this day, 10 or 15% of their billing meters are wrong because they either can't get it, it fell off the connection, they have to estimate it. There's some process that's occurring that creates errors. Technicians are still giving us bad meters. For whatever reason, we allow that to happen. Right. And so there's inherent problems with the page rate billing system that, in our heyday was a great thing. Right. But I'm not sure that's the future.
I agree. And that's a good segue because we're kind of approaching the bottom of the half hour, which we try and keep fairly close to. And I wonder if you could give us some ideas like BEI. You guys have been around for how many years now? Like how many devices have?
1993.
1993, right? So you've seen a thing or two. You've seen a change or two, and maybe just kind of looking forward a bit. What kind of predictions do you have? So I agree with you. Like obviously, I'm self-serving. This whole idea of flat rate becoming much more widely adopted by customers and by dealers delivering it. But what do you think? What are your future predictions based on the numbers that you're seeing?
Well, the COVID has created what I call an experiment, one that we've never really lived through before. And I don't know that we know how that experiment is going to play out yet. There was a lot of prognostication about the home office was here to stay. And, a percentage of that office was never going to come back, right? Those people were always going to stay hybrid or stay home. I don't know that I agree with that. The social ramifications of isolation doesn't work for everybody. And I've seen it in my own business. I've talked to plenty of people that go, I just can't do this. I got to be in a place where I interact with people, right? Collaboration and the energy and the ideas that are spawned from that personal interaction, just like with our company meeting this week. We got way more out of that conversation being in a room together than we would ever get out of a Zoom meeting, right? So I don't know how that experiment's just going to play out because that does impact print at some level, right?
Yeah.
Back to the office, print still I think will change, but it won't be impacted quite as much as if 50% of the workforce stayed at home, right? Because they are not going to print and carry that stuff back to the office. They're going to send it as an attachment via email or document management or SharePoint, right? So the prediction is print is still here. It's still a great business. There's still a lot of opportunity there. But as dealers, what I've always said, and I've got a BTA webinar coming up later this month that talks about the same thing, is that we have got to take the high margin opportunity we have in print today, maximize that to the greatest degree possible to have the revenue necessary to look at all of the diversification opportunities, whatever that is, whether that's, shredders, IT, whatever, security, whatever it is, take advantage of the profit potential that you have in print by using the data to get good at it, right? Because if we ran managed, one of the reasons I believe dealers fail at managed IT as much as they do is because they try to apply the same service laissez-faire as they do in IT and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? We get away with so much in service because the margins are so good, right?
Yeah.
When I see a dealer that's got a 8 or 10% first call effectiveness rate and they're still making 50 points, I'm going, how is that even possible? But it is, and dealers do it all the time. So my prediction is that we're going to have to get more disciplined at the way we manage our service organizations to maximize that profit so that we have the necessary resources to make the investment in that diversification, which is going to be necessary, right? And print will become a different mix of that, but it will always be there.
I love that. I really like that you pointed the fact that we really do have to do is get tighter on what we're doing today so we have more money to do what we want to do tomorrow, right? That we're stronger. I love it. Yeah, and I can't thank you enough, Wes, for joining us today and sharing these things. And for everyone that's tuned in, obviously, that's either watching us live or will be watching the recordings on Facebook, LinkedIn, or on YouTube, please make sure that you reach out to Wes McArtor, BI Services. You can find them on LinkedIn, or you can visit their website. They have some incredible data sets to help you better manage not just the service part of your business, but every aspect of it. So, Wes, can't thank you enough.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. He's always one of my favorite people to talk to because I always hear a new number that shocks me and surprises me, right? And I think the one for me today, the eye opener was, well, two of them actually, going from 3,500 pages to 800 per unit per month, like that decline. And then looking at that pool of 353,000 devices that are doing 484 pages a month on average. Just astounding, right? And certainly for everybody else that's joined us today, Art Post, Greg Walters, great to see you, Jean-Louis. And who else do we have commenting with us today? Jean Alfred, great to see you from Norway. And for everybody else, make sure you enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll see you next week for another episode of Flat Rate World Live.
We'll see everybody. Enjoyed the chat. Enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Cheers, all.